My name is Dorothy Wright. I'm 68 years old, and last Tuesday, I sat in a hospital conference room while my son-in-law told a doctor I didn't understand what was happening anymore. I'd balanced my own checkbook for 47 years. Never missed a mortgage payment. Never bounced a check. I was the one who handled every medical decision when my husband was dying, the DNR order, the hospice arrangements, the funeral planning. For 34 years, people came to me when something needed to be handled quietly and correctly. So when Kenneth leaned back in that plastic chair, fingers laced casually over his stomach, and said to the young doctor like he was discussing the weather, "She doesn't really understand what's happening anymore," I felt the world tilt sideways. My daughter sat beside him, eyes red but distant. She didn't contradict him, didn't look at me, just stared at her hands folded in her lap. The doctor wrote something down. I opened my mouth to protest, but Kenneth continued smoothly. "We just want to make sure she's safe. That's all that matters." And I realized, with cold clarity, that they were discussing my mental capacity without actually asking me anything. "Mrs. Wright," the doctor said, finally addressing me directly. "Do you know where you are?" Of course I knew. Mercy General Hospital. 4th floor. Conference room B. Kenneth made a small sound, half sigh, half sympathetic chuckle. "She's very oriented to place. It's the reasoning that's become difficult." The doctor nodded, writing more notes. My chest tightened. This wasn't a conversation. It was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. "Can you tell me what year it is?" the doctor asked. 2024. "And who's the president?" I answered correctly. The doctor seemed pleased. Kenneth less so. "These basic questions don't really capture the issue," Kenneth said gently. "It's the day-to-day things. Managing bills, remembering appointments, making safe decisions." My daughter finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "She left the stove on last month. The whole house could have burned down." I turned to her sharply. The igniter was broken. I called the repairman the next day. "I have the receipt." Kenneth touched her hand. "See? She gets confused like this. Defensive when we're just trying to help." The doctor made another note. I watched his pen move across the page, each stroke feeling like a nail in a coffin I hadn't known was being built. "I think," the doctor said carefully, "we should schedule a formal competency evaluation. Just to establish a baseline." The room spun. Competency evaluation. The words that could strip away everything I'd built, everything I was. "That sounds wise," Kenneth said, squeezing my daughter's hand. "We appreciate your thoroughness." I looked at my daughter, my baby, who I'd raised alone after her father died, who I'd put through college, who I'd loved with every fiber of my being. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The drive home was silent. My daughter, Rebecca, drove while Kenneth sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing back at me like I was a child who might misbehave. "Mom," Rebecca said finally, "this is for your own good." "What is?" "Making sure you're okay. That you're safe." I stared out the window at familiar streets. "I am safe. I've been taking care of myself for 40 years. Kenneth turned around, his expression patient and concerned in a way that made my skin crawl. "Mrs. Wright, we know this is hard. But you have to understand, we see things you don't. The forgetfulness, the confusion. It's progressing." "I'm not confused. You told Rebecca you'd meet her for lunch last Tuesday. You never showed up." I frowned, searching my memory. "I didn't. We never made plans for Tuesday." Rebecca's voice was small. "We did, Mom. You even suggested the restaurant." "Had we?" I remembered Tuesday clearly. I'd gone to the pharmacy, then the bank, then home. But had Rebecca called about lunch? I reached for the memory and found only fog. Kenneth's voice was gentle. "See? It's okay not to remember. That's why we're getting help." But something nagged at me. Something about the way he said it, the timing, the certainty in his voice. We pulled into my driveway. I reached for my house key, the spare I kept on my keychain. It didn't fit. I tried again, jiggling the key in the lock. Nothing. "Oh," Kenneth said from behind me. "I had the locks changed. For security. We have the new keys." He produced a key from his pocket and opened my front door. Inside, things were different. Subtly at first. The living room furniture had been rearranged. My reading chair moved away from the window. The small table where I kept my mail was gone entirely. We made some adjustments, Rebecca said, not quite looking at me. To make things safer. Less cluttered. I walked through my own house like a stranger. In the kitchen, cabinet locks had been installed, the kind you use for toddlers. My step stool was missing. Where are my financial documents? I asked. The folder I keep in the desk drawer? Kenneth answered smoothly. We're keeping those at our house for now. Just until everything's sorted out. We don't want anything to get lost or damaged. Those are mine. Of course they are. We're just helping organize them. Rebecca touched my arm. Mom, please don't get upset. This is temporary. Just until we're sure you're okay. Temporary. The word echoed in my skull. How long was temporary? Who decided when it ended? I walked to my bedroom. Even there, changes had been made. My jewelry box was gone. The photo albums I kept on the shelf vanished. My filing cabinet stood empty, doors hanging open like a mouth mid-scream. Where is everything? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Safe, Kenneth said. Everything's safe. You don't need to worry about any of it. That night, alone in my altered house, I lay in bed and tried to understand what was happening. When had I lost control? How had I not noticed the ground shifting beneath me? And then I remembered something. 6 months ago, Rebecca had suggested forwarding my mail to her address. Just the bills, Mom. To make sure they get paid on time. I'd agreed because it seemed helpful. Loving. Now I wondered what else I'd agreed to without understanding the implications. The next morning I took a walk. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was watering her roses. Dorothy, she called out, waving. How are you feeling? Fine, I said, pausing at her fence. Why do you ask? She looked uncomfortable. Rebecca mentioned you haven't been well. Said you might be having some difficulties. My chest tightened. What kind of difficulties? Memory issues, dear. She said she's helping manage things for you now. Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. She's such a devoted daughter. Not everyone would step up like that. I forced a smile. When did she tell you this? Oh, a few weeks ago. She was picking up your mail from the box. Said she'd moved the address to her house so nothing important would be missed. The mail. I hadn't seen my own mail in months. Every bill, every statement, every official document. Rebecca had them all. Did she say anything else? Mrs. Patterson hesitated. She mentioned you'd been getting confused about appointments. Forgetting conversations. She was worried about you living alone. I thanked her and walked home, my mind racing. Rebecca had been talking to the neighbors. Building a narrative. Creating a story where I was declining, failing, needing rescue. But when had it started? I replayed the last 6 months like a film. The small suggestions, let me handle that for you. The gentle redirections, are you sure you remember correctly? The gradual accumulation of helpful interventions that had slowly, methodically, erased me from my own life. And Kenneth had been there for all of it. In every conversation, every decision, every moment where control had shifted away from me. I thought about the hospital meeting. How Kenneth had answered questions before I could speak. How he'd reframed every protest as confusion. A pattern emerged. And at the center of it was my son-in-law. That evening, Kenneth and Rebecca came for dinner. Kenneth insisted they cook. No need to stress yourself, Mom, while I sat in my own kitchen like a guest. He spoke to me the way you'd speak to a confused child. Slow. Loud. Aggressively sweet. How are you feeling today, Mom? He asked, enunciating each word carefully. I'm fine, Kenneth. That's wonderful. Did you remember to take your vitamins? I didn't take vitamins. But before I could say so, he'd moved on, pulling ingredients from my refrigerator with the casual authority of ownership. During dinner, he told a story about a family vacation from years ago. He got the details wrong, mixed up the location, the year, who'd been there. I corrected him gently. That was in Florida, not California. And it was 2015, not 2018. Kenneth smiled indulgently. I think you're mixing up different trips, Mom. We were definitely in California. No, It's okay, he said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. That's not how it happened, but it's fine. Memory is tricky. Rebecca nodded, not questioning him. Not defending my version. Just accepting his word over mine. I looked at Kenneth's face, the patient smile, the concerned eyes, and realized he'd done this before. Many times. The performance was too smooth, too practiced. How many corrections had I made that he'd dismissed as confusion? How many times had he rewritten reality while I sat there, uncertain, beginning to doubt my own mind? Actually, I said firmly, I'm certain it was Florida. I have photos. Sure, Mom. Whatever you remember. His tone said, let the confused old woman have her delusion. Rebecca wouldn't look at me. And I understood suddenly that she'd chosen to believe him long ago. After they left, I tried to talk to Rebecca alone. Caught her in the driveway while Kenneth was loading leftovers into their car. Honey, I said quietly, when did you stop trusting me? She flinched. Mom, it's not about trust. Then what is it about? It's about keeping you safe. You don't see it, but there are signs. The forgetfulness, the confusion. What confusion? Give me one example that isn't Kenneth telling you I'm confused. She was quiet for a long moment. You called me by the wrong name last month. When? You called me Barbara. Her eyes were wet. Barbara was your sister. She's been dead for 10 years. I searched my memory desperately. Had I? I don't remember that. That's the problem, Mom. You don't remember. Kenneth appeared at her shoulder. Everything okay? Fine, Rebecca said quickly. Mom's just tired. He smiled at me. Get some rest, Mrs. Wright. Big day tomorrow, the evaluation appointment. After they drove away, I stood in my driveway trying to remember calling Rebecca the wrong name. The memory wouldn't come. Had I really done it? Or had Kenneth told Rebecca I'd done it, and she'd believed him without question? I went inside and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd done taxes, balanced budgets, made every important decision for decades. And I thought about Kenneth's question in the car, who benefits if you're declared incompetent? The answer was obvious. Kenneth and Rebecca would get control of my house, my savings, my life insurance policies. Everything I'd built would become theirs to manage. Protect them from what? Rebecca had said Kenneth was protecting them. Protecting them from me having control of my own assets. That's what. The next morning, I called Lawrence Brennan. He'd been our family attorney for 30 years, handled my husband's estate, helped with property transfers, witnessed important documents. If anyone would listen without condescension, it would be Lawrence. His secretary tried to schedule me for next month. Mr. Brennan's calendar is very full. This is urgent, I said firmly. Tell him Dorothy Wright needs to see him today. He'll make time. An hour later, I sat in his wood-paneled office, afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. Lawrence didn't talk down to me, didn't question my lucidity. He just listened. I told him everything. The hospital meeting, the changed locks, the missing documents, Kenneth's careful reframing of every conversation. When I finished, Lawrence leaned back in his chair and asked one question. Dorothy, who benefits if you're declared incompetent? Kenneth and Rebecca. They get control of everything. And what does Kenneth do for work? I paused. He's between jobs. Has been for about a year. Lawrence made a note. So he has financial pressure. I suppose so. And access to your daughter, who trusts him completely. I nodded slowly, seeing where he was going. Let me ask you something else, Lawrence said. When did Kenneth first suggest you might be having memory problems? I thought back. About 8 months ago. Right after he lost his last job. Lawrence's expression darkened. And these problems he describes, the confusion, the forgetfulness, do they happen when you're alone? Or when he's around? I sat very still, mind racing. When he's around. Or when Rebecca reports something he told her I did. So you have no independent verification of these incidents? No. Lawrence stood and walked to his filing cabinet. Let's look at what documents you've signed in the last year. Particularly any changes to your trust or estate planning. We spent 2 hours going through my file. Most documents were unchanged. The trust my husband and I had created 20 years ago, the will, the property deeds. But one document was missing. Where's the trust amendment? Lawrence asked, flipping through pages. You signed it about 3 years ago after William died. Gave you more flexibility in distributing assets. I remembered signing something. Kenneth had been helpful that day, organizing papers, explaining what the attorney had said. I thought it was filed here. It should be, but it's not. Lawrence's frown deepened. Dorothy, who had access to this file? Just me. And I trailed off, remembering. Kenneth helped me organize everything last year. Said my filing system was confusing. He took some documents home to sort through. Did he return them all? I didn't know. At the time, I trusted him. Now, I wondered what else might be missing. Lawrence made several phone calls. Within an hour, he'd confirmed the trust amendment had never been filed with the court. As far as the legal system was concerned, it didn't exist. That document was important, Lawrence said. It gave you sole authority over your assets, unless 2 independent doctors certified you as incapacitated. Without it, the original trust provisions apply, and those are more vulnerable to challenge. Can we recreate it? Possibly. But if Kenneth argues you're incompetent, he'll claim any new documents are invalid. We need the original. I felt the ground shifting again. What if we can't find it? Lawrence looked at me seriously. Then we need to prove you're completely competent. Which means you need to ace that evaluation tomorrow. No mistakes, no hesitations, no moments of uncertainty. My hands shook. And if I don't, then Kenneth gets exactly what he wants. Control of your assets, your property, your life. And there won't be much I can do to stop him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the missing amendment, about Kenneth's careful manipulation, about Rebecca's willingness to believe his narrative over my reality. The next morning, I requested copies of my medical records from my primary care physician. Dr. Harris had known me for 15 years. Surely her notes would support my competence. The records arrived by email that afternoon. I opened them with shaking hands. Most entries were routine. Annual checkups, medication refills, minor complaints. But starting 8 months ago, a different pattern emerged. Third-party reports dominated the notes. Patient's daughter reports increasing forgetfulness. Son-in-law expressed concern about patient's ability to manage finances. Family members note confusion about appointments and medication schedules. Kenneth's name appeared again and again. He'd called Dr. Harris multiple times, sent emails, built a documented case of my supposed decline, and I'd never known about any of it. One note particularly chilled me. Son-in-law reports patient becoming paranoid, accusing family of trying to control her. Consistent with early dementia presentation. If I accused Kenneth of manipulation, it would be dismissed as paranoia, a symptom of my supposed condition. He'd built a perfect trap. Every defense I mounted would be reinterpreted as proof of my incompetence. I printed the records and took them to Lawrence the next morning. He read through them, expression grim. This is sophisticated. He's created a medical narrative without you ever being part of the conversation. Can we fight it? We can try. But Dorothy, you need to understand, these records will be part of the competency evaluation. The examiner will see them and form opinions based on what Kenneth reported. So I'm already guilty in their eyes. Not guilty, just compromised. They'll be looking for signs of what Kenneth described. I felt tears threatening but pushed them back. I hadn't cried when my husband died. I wouldn't cry now. Then I'll give them nothing to find, I said firmly. The competency evaluation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I arrived early, dressed professionally, carrying a folder with my own documentation, bank statements, tax returns, medical records I'd managed independently. The psychologist, Dr. Simmons, was young and earnest. She explained the process: cognitive tests, memory assessments, evaluations of judgment and reasoning. Kenneth and Rebecca sat in the waiting room, ready to provide context if needed. The evaluation began. Simple questions first: date, location, current events. I answered each one clearly and correctly. Then came memory tests. Lists of words to recall. Sequences of numbers to repeat. Stories to remember and retell. I did well. Not perfectly, who could under such pressure, but well enough. But Dr. Simmons kept glancing at her notes. Kenneth's reports, I realized. Looking for the confusion he described. Your family mentioned some incidents, she said gently. Missed appointments? Confusion about conversations. My daughter and I had a misunderstanding about lunch plans, I said carefully. But I haven't missed any actual scheduled appointments. I can provide my calendar if needed. And the stove incident? A broken igniter. Repaired the next day. I have the receipt. For every incident Kenneth had reported, I had an explanation. A receipt. A record. Evidence that I was managing fine. But I could see Dr. Simmons's uncertainty. The report said one thing. I was saying another. Who to believe? Toward the end of the evaluation, she asked me to solve some complex problems. Financial scenarios, medical decisions, hypothetical situations requiring judgment. I worked through each one methodically, showed my reasoning, explained my thought process. When it was over, Dr. Simmons thanked me and said she'd compile her report within a week. How do you think she did? Kenneth asked from the doorway. He'd been listening. I can't discuss that, Dr. Simmons said professionally. But I saw her glance at her notes again. At Kenneth's carefully documented reports of my supposed decline, and I knew the results would be labeled inconclusive at best. Lawrence's call came 2 days later. The preliminary report is concerning. My stomach dropped. How concerning? Dr. Simmons found no clear evidence of incapacity, but she noted inconsistencies between family reports and observed presentation. She's recommending further evaluation. Further evaluation? More tests. More doctors. More opportunities for Kenneth to provide his narrative. I sat down heavily. So I didn't fail, but I didn't win. Inconclusive can be twisted either way, Lawrence said grimly. Kenneth will argue it proves you're good at hiding symptoms. That you need protection despite appearing competent. What do? We need something definitive. Hard evidence that either proves your competence or exposes Kenneth's manipulation. That night, Rebecca called. Her voice was gentle but firm. Mom, Kenneth and I have been talking. We think it might be time to look at assisted living facilities. Just for now. Until you're feeling better. I'm feeling fine. The evaluation was inconclusive. That means. It means I'm fine, Rebecca. Inconclusive doesn't mean incompetent. But it doesn't mean you're not struggling either. She paused. We found a really nice place. Just for a visit. You'd have your own room, people to help with meals, activities. I don't need activities. I need my own home. Mom, please. This is so hard for me too. I'm trying to do what's best. After we hung up, I sat in the dark and felt the walls closing in. Assisted living for now would become permanent. Kenneth would have what he wanted. Me removed, contained, my assets under his control. I called Lawrence, voice shaking. They're talking about assisted living. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dorothy, do you remember that safe deposit box William had? The one at First National Bank. I frowned. Vaguely. He kept important papers there. Did you ever clear it out after he died? I tried to remember. I don't think so. I forgot about it entirely. Then we need to check it. Tomorrow. First thing. The bank manager led us to the vault. I signed the access form with shaking hands. Worried they'd question my right to be there. Worried Kenneth had somehow gotten here first. But the box was untouched. Inside were documents my husband had stored decades ago. Deeds. Insurance policies. Birth certificates. And beneath everything else, a sealed envelope with my name on it in William's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside were 2 documents. The first was the trust amendment, the one that had gone missing from Lawrence's files. William had kept a copy, not trusting our home filing system. The second was even better. The original trust document, filed and notarized, giving me sole authority over all assets unless 2 independent physicians certified incapacity. Kenneth didn't know about this, Lawrence said, reading quickly. He thought the amendment was gone. That the original trust was more vulnerable. But it's not. No. This document explicitly requires 2 independent medical opinions. Not family reports. Not a single evaluation. 2 separate doctors must agree you're incapacitated before anyone can assume control. I felt lightheaded with relief. And that hasn't happened. No. Dr. Simmons didn't certify incapacity, she said inconclusive. And you haven't been evaluated by a second doctor. Lawrence started making copies, his hands moving efficiently. This changes everything, Dorothy. Kenneth's entire strategy was based on the trust being more flexible than it actually is. With this document, he has no legal ground to stand on. I looked at the papers. My husband's final protection, given from beyond the grave. There's something else, Lawrence said, pulling out another document. This is a typed summary of your condition, supposedly from you to the bank, requesting Kenneth be added to your accounts. It's dated 3 months ago. I took it, scanning the text. I never wrote this. I know. But Kenneth apparently sent it to First National, trying to get access to your accounts. They rejected it because it wasn't properly notarized. But he tried. The words swam before my eyes. This wasn't concern. This wasn't a worried son-in-law trying to help. This was calculated theft. Careful, methodical control. And now I had proof. Lawrence wanted to confront Kenneth immediately. I asked him to wait. Let him keep assuming I'm powerless, I said. Let him keep building his case. The further he goes, the worse it looks when we expose him. Are you sure? Every day we wait. I'm sure. That weekend, Kenneth called a family meeting. I arrived at Rebecca's house to find Kenneth had prepared a presentation. Actual slides, projected on their living room wall. Financial planning for Mom's future, the title read. He walked us through his plan. Selling my house. Moving my savings into a managed account. Setting up a monthly allowance so Mom doesn't have to worry about bills. Rebecca nodded along. So did her brother, my son Jason, who'd driven in from Denver. Kenneth used phrases like quality of life and reducing burden and protecting assets. Everyone nodded. They saw a concerned son-in-law taking charge, making the hard decisions, protecting his mother-in-law from her own decline. I saw a thief presenting his robbery as charity. Any questions? Kenneth asked, clicking to his final slide. I have one, Lawrence said from the doorway. Everyone turned. I hadn't told them Lawrence would be joining us. Kenneth's smile tightened. Mr. Brennan. I didn't realize you were invited. Dorothy invited me. Lawrence stepped into the room, briefcase in hand. I'm her attorney. I thought I should be present for discussions about her assets. Of course. Kenneth's voice was smooth, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. We're just trying to help. I'm sure you are, Lawrence said mildly. But before we proceed with any plans, there are some legal documents we should review. He opened his briefcase, and Kenneth's world began to crumble. Lawrence placed the trust document on the coffee table. This is Dorothy's legally binding trust, created with her late husband 23 years ago and never amended. Kenneth frowned. I thought there was an amendment. There was. But it was never properly filed. This document remains in effect. Rebecca leaned forward. What does it say? Lawrence walked her through it calmly. It gives your mother sole control of all assets unless 2 independent physicians certify she lacks capacity to manage her affairs. Not one evaluation. Not family concerns. 2 separate doctors, both certifying incapacity. But the evaluation, Kenneth started, was inconclusive, Lawrence said. And inconclusiveness is not certification of incapacity. Dr. Simmons did not declare Dorothy incompetent. She simply noted some inconsistencies in family reports. The room had gone very quiet. Furthermore, Lawrence continued, this document requires any changes to Dorothy's financial management be approved by an independent trustee, specifically myself, not by family members. Kenneth's jaw tightened. We're just trying to help her. I understand. But legally, no changes can be made to Dorothy's assets without following the process outlined in this trust. And that process hasn't been initiated because the necessary medical certifications don't exist. Jason spoke up. So Mom's still in control? Completely, Lawrence said. She always was. I watched Kenneth's face. The concern melted away, replaced by something harder. Colder. There's one more thing, Lawrence said. He pulled out the bank summary. Kenneth, did you write this letter to First National Bank requesting access to Dorothy's accounts? Kenneth went pale. It's a simple question. Did you write this, claiming to speak on Dorothy's behalf without her authorization? The silence stretched. Finally, Kenneth said, I was trying to help. By gaining unauthorized access to her bank accounts? She wasn't managing them properly. According to whom? Lawrence's voice was sharp now. Her bank statements show perfect management. No missed payments, no overdrafts, no errors. Rebecca was staring at her husband like she'd never seen him before. Lawrence didn't stop. He pulled out medical records, highlighting Kenneth's calls to Dr. Harris. Your husband has been reporting Dorothy's supposed decline to her doctor without her knowledge. Building a medical narrative based on incidents Dorothy can't verify and that have alternative explanations. He showed them the timeline, how Kenneth's reports had intensified after he lost his job, how each incident he reported happened to align with moments when Dorothy's assets were being discussed. The stove incident, Lawrence said, happened the day before Kenneth tried to get added to Dorothy's bank accounts. The missed lunch occurred right after Dorothy declined to co-sign a loan for Kenneth's business venture. I watched my daughter's face change. The trust cracking. The doubts flooding in. Every time Dorothy asserted her independence, Lawrence continued, Kenneth reported new symptoms. Every time she refused to give him control, she was labeled confused. Kenneth stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I've been trying to protect her. From what? I asked quietly. He turned to me, and I saw it clearly now, not concern but calculation. Not love but greed. From making mistakes that would cost her everything, he said. Or from keeping you from getting everything? His mouth opened. Closed. He looked at Rebecca for support. She was looking at the documents spread across the table. The evidence of his manipulation. The proof of his lies. The confusion, she said slowly, always appeared when money was involved. Kenneth reached for her hand. Honey, you're not seeing this clearly. She pulled away. When did it start? The reports to Dr. Harris. When exactly did they begin? Lawrence checked the records. 8 months ago. 3 weeks after Kenneth's employment ended. Rebecca looked at her husband. You've been out of work for 8 months. You told me it was 6. I was trying not to worry you. And all this time you've been telling me my mother was declining, that we needed to help her, that we needed control of her finances. The pieces were clicking into place for her. I could see it happening. Kenneth's voice grew sharp. Are you really going to believe them over me? Your own husband. Rebecca asked him one question he couldn't answer. Did you call Dr. Harris without telling Mom? The silence was damning. Kenneth tried to recover. Shifted tactics. Became the wounded party. Misunderstood, unappreciated, unfairly accused. I was trying to help, he said again, voice breaking. Everything I did was out of concern. But the performance was over. We'd all seen behind the curtain. Dr. Harris had joined the meeting remotely. Lawrence had arranged it without telling me. She appeared on Rebecca's laptop screen, professional and calm. Mrs. Wright, Dr. Harris said, I want to apologize. I relied too heavily on third-party reports without verifying information directly with you. You didn't know, I said. I should have. Medical decisions should be made with the patient, not around them. She looked at Kenneth through the screen. Mr. Morrison, the reports you provided painted a concerning picture. But when I compare them to Mrs. Wright's actual medical history, the pattern doesn't hold up. I reported what I saw. You reported interpretations. And those interpretations consistently supported a narrative of decline that Mrs. Wright's actual medical condition doesn't reflect. Dr. Harris pulled up her notes. Mrs. Wright's last cognitive screening, done at her annual physical 2 months ago, was completely normal. Her labs are excellent. Her ability to manage her medications, describe her symptoms, and make medical decisions is completely intact. She looked directly at Kenneth. Based on my actual examination of the patient, not third-party reports, I see no evidence of cognitive decline or incapacity. Kenneth's face was red. She called Rebecca by the wrong name. Did she? Dr. Harris asked. Or did you tell Rebecca she did? The question hung in the air. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Did you lie about that? Kenneth didn't answer. Because I've been thinking, Rebecca continued, and I don't actually remember that conversation. I remember you telling me about it. But I don't remember it happening. Lawrence pulled out another document. I've been doing some checking. Kenneth, you attempted to refinance Dorothy's house 6 months ago. You forged her signature on the application. I didn't forge. The application was denied because the bank caught the signature discrepancy. But you tried. My son Jason finally spoke. Jesus Christ, Ken. What were you planning to do? The answer was obvious now. Get Dorothy declared incompetent. Gain control of her assets. Sell her house, drain her accounts, leave her with nothing while enriching himself. And he'd nearly succeeded. Lawrence formally requested withdrawal of any competency proceedings. Mrs. Wright is demonstrably capable. Any suggestion otherwise is based on false or misleading information. Dr. Harris submitted a letter. Based on my direct examination and review of medical records, I find no evidence of cognitive impairment or incapacity in Mrs. Wright. I recommend no restrictions on her independence or decision-making authority. Kenneth tried to argue. Said Lawrence was biased. That Dr. Harris hadn't seen the day-to-day struggles. Lawrence smiled. Then let's get a second opinion. Independent evaluation by a doctor of Dorothy's choosing, not yours. The evaluation happened 2 weeks later. Different doctor, different approach, thorough and fair. The results were unequivocal. Mrs. Wright demonstrates cognitive function well within normal range for her age. She manages complex information competently, makes sound judgments, and shows no signs of impairment. Kenneth's entire case collapsed. Without medical certification of incapacity, he had no legal standing. The trust remained in my sole control. My assets remained mine. But the real shift was in Rebecca's eyes. She'd seen what her husband was capable of. Seen the manipulation, the lies, the calculated cruelty. I need you to leave, she told Kenneth one evening. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later. Pack your things. Go stay somewhere else. This is my house too. It's my house. My name on the deed. Another thing you tried to change without telling me. He'd been working on that too, Lawrence discovered. Trying to add his name to Rebecca's property. Consolidating control. Kenneth left that night. Took his clothes, his car, his carefully constructed lies. And left behind a family that finally saw him clearly. The bank summary bothered me. Not just because Kenneth had written it, but because it revealed how far he'd been willing to go. Lawrence investigated further. The summary wasn't the only document Kenneth had forged or fabricated. There were emails to my financial advisor, supposedly from me, requesting Kenneth be added to accounts. Letters to insurance companies. Applications for credit cards in my name. Most had been caught by security measures, but a few had slipped through. He opened a credit card in your name, Lawrence told me. Used your information. Never told you. Ran up $12,000 in charges. My hands shook. What kind of charges? Lawrence showed me the statements. Expensive dinners. Designer clothes. Cash advances. Kenneth had been living beyond his means on credit he'd stolen from me. We can press charges, Lawrence said. This is identity theft. Fraud. I thought about it. About Rebecca. About my grandchildren who loved their father despite what he'd done. Can we just close the accounts? Freeze my credit? Make sure he can't do it again. Yes. But Dorothy, he should face consequences. He's about to lose his marriage. His reputation. His access to the life he was building on lies. I met Lawrence's eyes. That's consequence enough. What I didn't say, I wanted this over. Wanted him gone from my life without the drama of criminal proceedings. Wanted peace more than revenge. Lawrence handled the financial cleanup. Closed fraudulent accounts. Flagged my credit. Set up monitoring systems to catch any future attempts. The bills Kenneth had racked up were his problem now, not mine. And I reclaimed what was mine. My house, my accounts, my independence, my life. Rebecca filed for divorce 6 weeks later. Kenneth contested it, of course. Claimed she was being influenced by me. That I'd poisoned her against him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures. The fraudulent accounts. The manufactured medical narrative. Their marriage counselor, Kenneth had insisted on counseling, took one session to recommend separation. There's a fundamental breach of trust here that I don't see being repaired. Kenneth came to my house one night. I found him on my porch, looking smaller somehow. Defeated. Mrs. Wright, he said quietly. Can we talk? I should have said no. Should have closed the door. But something made me invite him in. We sat in my living room. The furniture back in its proper place, my documents returned to my filing cabinet, my life restored. I never meant for it to go this far, he said. Didn't you? I was struggling. Out of work, bills piling up. And you had so much. It seemed like you wouldn't even miss it. So you decided to take it. I decided to help myself to what I thought you wouldn't need. He looked at me, and I saw something almost like regret. I convinced myself it was for the best. That you really were declining. That I was protecting Rebecca from future problems. You convinced yourself of a lot of things. I know. His voice was barely audible. And I lost everything because of it. I should have felt satisfaction. Triumph. Victory. Instead, I just felt tired. Why are you here, Kenneth? To ask you to explain to Rebecca. To help her see that I made mistakes. But I'm not a bad person. That I love her. I looked at this man who'd tried to steal my life. Who'd manipulated my daughter. Who'd systematically worked to have me declared incompetent so he could loot my assets. And I said the only thing that felt true. No. No, he repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. I won't help you. You built this situation. You live with it. But Rebecca is making her own choices. Based on what you did, not what I'm telling her. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. You need to leave now. He tried to argue. Tried to plead. Tried to make me the villain for not rescuing him from consequences he'd earned. I called Lawrence. He called the police. Kenneth left before they arrived, but I filed a trespassing report anyway. No more chances. No more mercy. The divorce proceedings revealed more damage. Kenneth had been siphoning money from Rebecca's accounts too. Small amounts, hidden in ways she hadn't noticed. Building his secret reserves while reporting financial struggles. He took nearly $30,000 from me, Rebecca told me over coffee one morning. Her eyes were still red, but there was steel in her voice now. Over 2 years. Just took it. I'm sorry, honey. Don't be. You tried to teach me to watch my finances. To keep things separate. I didn't listen. She stirred her coffee mechanically. I thought that was cynical. That marriage meant complete trust. Trust has to be earned. And verified. She almost smiled. That's very you, Mom. Is that a compliment? It is now. We sat in silence for a while. Then Rebecca asked, Did you ever suspect? Before all this. I thought about it honestly. Not suspect exactly. But something always felt slightly off. The way he'd answer for you. The way he'd insert himself into decisions that should have been yours alone. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? She was quiet. Then no. Probably not. You had to see it yourself. I could have told you 100 times, and you would have defended him. Because you loved him. Because you'd committed to him. I did love him, she said softly. Or I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I knew him at all. The legal resolution came swiftly once the evidence was compiled. Kenneth had no defense. No explanation that held up to scrutiny. Lawrence presented everything to Kenneth's attorney. The forged documents, the fraudulent credit cards, the manufactured medical narrative, the attempts to access my accounts. Kenneth's lawyer recommended he agree to whatever terms we offered. Fighting would only make things worse. The settlement was simple. Kenneth got nothing. No claim to Rebecca's house. No share of assets he'd tried to steal from me. No access to the life he'd been building on lies. He was also barred from contacting me. From coming to my property. From making any claims about my mental capacity. In exchange, we didn't press criminal charges. He's getting off easy, Lawrence said. He's losing his wife, his reputation, his future plans. That's not nothing. But I knew what Lawrence meant. Kenneth should have faced criminal consequences for what he'd done. For the fraud, the forgery, the calculated cruelty. Instead, he walked away with his freedom intact. Just not much else. Rebecca's divorce was finalized 4 months later. Kenneth moved to another state. Started over somewhere people didn't know his history. And I reclaimed my life completely. No more changed locks. No more missing documents. No more carefully worded questions about my memory. Just peace. And independence. And the satisfaction of knowing I'd fought back and won. The consequences rippled outward in ways I hadn't anticipated. Other family members who'd sided with Kenneth suddenly remembered they'd always had doubts. Friends who'd accepted his narrative quietly apologized. Mrs. Patterson brought over a casserole and a sheepish expression. I should have questioned what he was telling me about you. You've always been sharp as a tack. It's fine, I said, accepting the casserole. It's not. But thank you for saying so. The most unexpected consequence was how Rebecca changed. She became more cautious, more independent, more fierce about protecting what was hers. I'm doing what you always told me, she said one day. Keeping my finances separate. Watching for red flags. Not dismissing my own judgment. That's good. I wish I'd listened sooner. You listened when it mattered. She'd also started going through our family history differently. Questioning things Kenneth had told her about me, about her father, about our past. Did Dad really oppose you working? She asked one afternoon. No. Why? Kenneth said he did. Said you'd always resented having to work instead of staying home. I almost laughed. Your father encouraged me to work. Was proud of my career. We were partners. Kenneth told me a lot of things that don't match what I actually remember. He'd rewritten our family history to suit his narrative. Made me smaller in Rebecca's memory, so his takeover would seem reasonable. But the truth was surfacing now. And with it, a clearer picture of who I'd always been. Competent, strong, capable. Everything Kenneth had needed me not to be. Kenneth tried to contact me one more time. A letter arrived at Lawrence's office, forwarded to avoid violating the contact restrictions. In it, Kenneth apologized. Said he'd been wrong. Claimed he'd learned from his mistakes and wanted to make amends. The letter ended with a request. Would I consider writing a character reference for him? He was applying for a job and needed someone to vouch for his integrity. I showed the letter to Lawrence. He read it, shook his head, and said, "The audacity is almost impressive." He thinks I'll help him. He thinks everyone will help him. That's how people like Kenneth operate. They do terrible things, then expect forgiveness and assistance. I wrote a response, simple and direct. No. What you did to me was calculated and cruel. I will not help you rebuild a reputation you destroyed through your own actions. Please don't contact me again. Lawrence mailed it. Kenneth didn't write back. But I heard through Rebecca that he was telling people in his new city that his ex-wife's mother had sabotaged his career, that I'd poisoned his marriage out of jealousy or control. The same playbook. The same lies. Just new targets. I hoped his new community saw through him faster than we had, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd protected myself. Protected Rebecca. That was enough. Life settled into a new rhythm. I took a trip to Ireland I'd been postponing for years. Joined a book club. Started volunteering at the library. Simple pleasures I'd neglected while fighting to prove I was competent enough to deserve them. Rebecca and I grew closer. We had lunch every week, talked more honestly, rebuilt trust that Kenneth had eroded. My grandchildren, Rebecca's kids, visited more often. I taught them to bake, took them to museums, told them stories about their grandfather. One afternoon, my grandson asked, "Grandma, why did Uncle Kenneth tell everyone you were sick?" Rebecca tensed, but I answered calmly. Because he wanted something I had. And he thought if people believed I couldn't take care of myself, he could take it. That's mean. Yes, it is. But you stopped him. I did. Because you're not actually sick. That's right. He considered this. Good. It was that simple for him. Bad person tried to do bad thing. Good person stopped him. Justice served. I wished adult understanding could be that clear. But I'd learned something through all of this. Age is too often mistaken for weakness. Gray hair is assumed to mean clouded judgment. The simple fact of being 68 made people discount my competence. Kenneth had weaponized those assumptions. Used them to build his case. Nearly succeeded. And I'd almost let him. Almost started doubting myself. Wondering if maybe he was right. If maybe I was declining and didn't see it. That was the cruelest part, the way his lies had made me question my own mind. But I'd fought back. Trusted my own judgment. Demanded evidence rather than accepting his narrative. And I'd won. Not dramatically. Not with explosive confrontations or satisfying revenge. Just quietly. Persistently. By refusing to surrender control of my life. I'm sitting in my living room now. In the chair I picked out 30 years ago. in the house I bought with money I earned, surrounded by a life I built. Kenneth is gone. The locks are mine again. The documents are filed properly. My independence is restored. And I'm exactly who I've always been. Sharp, capable, strong. Not because I proved it to anyone else, but because I never stopped knowing it myself. People still ask how I am. Still speak a bit slower, a bit louder. Still check if I need help with things I've been managing for decades. I don't fight it anymore. Don't try to convince them. I just live. Competently. Independently. Fully. And when I look back on what Kenneth tried to do, the systematic dismantling of my autonomy, the careful construction of my supposed incompetence, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just grateful. Grateful I had the resources to fight back. Grateful for Lawrence's expertise. Grateful for that safe deposit box and the documents that saved me. Grateful my husband had known, even years ago, that I might need protection someday. Kenneth wanted to write my ending. Wanted to make it a story of decline, of dependency, of quiet surrender to his control. Instead, it's a story about one document that ruined his plans. About an old woman who refused to be erased. About competence that couldn't be faked away by lies and manipulation. He didn't lose everything. He has his freedom, his new life, his ability to start over. But he lost the one thing he wanted most, power over me. And I kept the one thing that mattered most, myself. That's victory enough. I pour myself tea, open my book, and settle into my favorite chair. My house. My life. My choices. No one questions them anymore. And if they did, well, I have documentation.